The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
After all the hubbub and bragging about the Trump Republican tax cuts, which would supposedly see almost everybody earning more in their paychecks from week to week, there's a new poll now that says a majority of Americans actually aren't seeing more money in their paychecks from week to week, the exact opposite of what we were told. This is CNBC's All America Economic Survey, and it finds that 52% of working adults have not seen a change in their checks that they're aware of, and I think that that's relevant. I'll get to that in a second. 32% say that they're taking home more money since the new tax law was enacted. 16% aren't sure. And we were told, remember, by Steven Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary, that 90% of Americans were going to see more money in their paychecks as a result of the tax bill. And I admit that this is kind of a weird poll because when you look at the internals, first of all, just because you're not seeing more money doesn't mean you're not getting it. Some people don't pay attention to their paycheck from week to week. For some, the change is really, really small, so it's not like a noticeable difference in how much money you have left over at the end of the month. And even though employers were supposed to put in place the new withholding tables by February 15th, not everybody has, right? So like we use a payroll company, and the first payroll that we ran in February, or February 15th, whatever the date was, the new withholding tables were automatically in place, and everybody on our staff is seeing a little bit more money in their paycheck each week. But that's anecdotal, right? It doesn't tell us what's going on nationally. And anecdotally speaking, there are people who have also lost quite a bit of money on the basis of not being able to claim children in college. The question in the end is going to be, if you have a little more money or a little less money, does it make a difference in your life? For some people, it does. For a lot of people, it's not money that actually makes a difference. And if that's the case, then we have to ask, well, was it worth going through something so massive, an overhaul of the entire tax system, endless amount of time for our elected officials in the House and Senate and the president and staff, all for a tiny change for most people that allows the very rich to get drastic cuts and what will eventually be the effective tax rates that they pay when they file taxes for 2018 next year. And that gets to the other point of the poll. In the poll, of those who said we do have more take-home pay, only 38% say that the difference is enough to even be fairly significant to them. That's not exactly what I would consider a major, major victory. So the biggest question is major tax cuts, right? Major, major tax cuts for the rich. Tiny changes for some working class people, by and large not life-changing, hugely damaging to the economy over the long term. Is it worth it? I guess we'll see in a few years. And as far as whether it's a voting issue, we'll see in November.
Yeah, I'd imagine for most people, it's something like $20 per pay period or $50 per pay period. And, you know, I don't want to laugh at that
no,
because
of course.
That could be a lot to someone.
Yeah.
But for most of us, I think it's kind of negligible.
It's kind of touchy to even talk about it because as soon as you say these are meaningless amounts of money, you immediately hear the Republicans who advocated for this saying, how elitist of you to suggest that $20 a pay period for someone is meaningless. For a lot of people, if they're paid every 2 weeks, an extra $40 a month covers formula for their baby or whatever, right? Costco membership was the thing that Paul Ryan or whoever was talking about. We're not saying that $40 a month is meaningless to everyone. What we're saying is, in the grand scheme of how much money went into this, how it might affect other elements of the economy over the long term, and how much of these savings are disproportionately going to the very, very rich, the question is, does it make sense? Is it worth it, given that we're talking about $20 a pay period or whatever? It's not laughing at or minimizing that $20 a pay period for someone can be meaningful. It's talking about the entire cost of this thing and contextualizing it in terms of how much is going to go to the very, very rich and how much actually goes to the working class. Send me your thoughts. Send me, even just tell me on Twitter at @dpakman, have you seen a change in your check? Let me know. I'm on Twitter at @dpakman. Show is on Twitter at David Pakman Show.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Today's new member of the day is Lawrence Thomas. Lawrence, thank you for being a member. I also want to thank longtime sustaining, supporting member Teresa Bryden, who has been with us since 2011. Very, very exciting. 7 years, even some members starting to hit the 8-year milestone. Lawrence, Teresa, thank you. You can join them even at 40% off by signing up at davidpakman.com/membership. You can also make a Patreon pledge at patreon.com/davidpakmanshow. And the coupon code for that 40% discount is VOTESOON18. Let's go to the phones, 617-830-4750. We are going to try our caller from the 408 area code. Caller from 408, go ahead.
Hey, David. I want to ask you about the whole March for Our Lives thing and the whole gun control debate. What do you think on that?
I'm sorry, which live thing?
March for Our Lives, the one those school kids went on. It was across the country.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm sorry. I just misunderstood you. Well, I mean, listen, I think that it's absolutely fantastic that we're seeing a level of engagement around the gun safety issue that we've not seen for a while. We should have seen it long ago. My only concern is it really going to achieve any change? And I don't know the answer to that.
Well, I'm saying that these kids are sort of like misguided in a way because I don't think the guns are the only problem. I think we as a country should focus more on mental health situations.
Well, listen, I've said before that I believe pretending that the guns aren't a problem at all is not a good idea. Pretending that mental health, hold on a second. Pretending that mental health isn't an issue at all is also not a good idea. So as I've laid out before, and I'm curious whether you agree with me, I think that this is a multifaceted problem, that it's a different problem in every country. So there are other countries that because of their culture, they don't have as many problems with guns despite high levels of gun ownership. In the United States, we've got a real problem with it. And part of it comes from a culture that is gun obsessed and sees guns as a way to solve problems. And that's a cultural issue that's got to be dealt with.
Well, I'm not saying guns aren't the problem. Of course, guns are the problem. But I'm saying that if we look at, the chemistry on why they do it, and we look at the brains of these people and see what they're thinking, we should be focused more on helping these people rather than they have to resort to extremities to make a point.
But so give me an example of what you mean by what have we found out about the brain chemistry of shooters?
Well, we know that Nicholas Cruz was isolated, that he was pushed over the edge because of his mother's death, because of him having to go through adoptions and stuff, and I'm sure no one wanted to listen to him, and he felt isolated.
Sure, but that sounds cultural more than a brain chemistry issue, right?
But it also has to start with the problems that you have in your head that makes you think this way, that makes you think me going out and shooting people is justified somehow.
I completely agree with you. I don't agree with you that we can call it a brain chemistry issue, but you're getting at the point, which is too many people in the United States believe that taking a gun and going and shooting people is a way to solve a problem. And of course, when they have really easy access to a ton of guns, that makes it possible for them to wreak a lot more havoc. So I think generally you and I agree.
Yes. What I also recommend is I think we should focus more on helping, like setting up clinics to help people, with therapy so that we can teach them, hey, there's more ways to get help other than shooting people. Right. And then when we finally have that problem under control, we will go ahead and go with gun control. Well,
I think there's no reason to delay the gun control just because you're trying to work on the mental health resources. I think you do both. They'd both be funded disparately, and I don't know that you need to wait on one to do the other. But I do appreciate the call, and I think you're making a lot of very, very good points. Thank you so much. 617-830-4750. Let's go to our next caller from the 562 area code. 562, who's this?
My name is Jonathan. I'm actually calling from Long Beach.
Okay, go ahead, Jonathan.
So I had a question in regards to the citizenship question on the census. I'm not too sure if that question was already asked earlier. In your opinion, what do you think Trump wants to accomplish with that question, and what would be some of the ramifications?
Yeah, so the idea is if you put a citizenship question on the census, even if that information cannot be used to find and deport undocumented immigrants, and of course there's disagreement about that, it's still going to scare a lot of people in the United States away from even completing the census. If the people who are scared away from completing the census are not just undocumented immigrants, but also legal immigrants who maybe just don't want to draw more attention to themselves because they understand the political climate that's going on, you are going to have minority groups underrepresented in the census. Because the census is used for redistricting and allocation of funds, you are going to have big blue states with a lot of immigrants receive less proportionately in funding. And you're also going to see, possibly, depending on exactly how it all comes out, you could see red states with a smaller immigrant population end up with more representation in the House of Representatives than blue states. So the impact could be absolutely huge.
Okay, perfect. But if it's just one simple question, whether you are a U.S. citizen or not, wouldn't it just be easier for people just to say yes or citizen, since there's no way to necessarily verify that?
Oh, you mean just lie on the question, even if the answer is no?
Yeah, correct.
Sure. You're not wrong that individuals could certainly do that. But the problem is that what you're trying to do with a policy like this in a country of 320 million people is you're trying to affect very, very large numbers. So if only a percentage of individuals don't participate because of the presence of that question, you can still achieve your political objectives by doing it, by including the question.
Okay. Well, perfect. Well, thank you for answering my question, David.
All right, no problem. Really appreciate it.
I wonder if it's a criminal offense to lie on the census form.
It probably is.
You think so?
But I mean, I don't know exactly, but there's certainly a lot of other cases that could be made. It's not quite. It's an interesting question, but it's certainly not quite that simple. There's other reasons people wouldn't just do that. Let's go to our next caller at the 630 area code. Caller from 630. Go ahead.
Hey, David. What's going on?
How you doing? Who's this?
To me, Ruben. Remember when I called you 2 months ago or 3 months ago about going on whether you go on Joe Rogan's podcast?
I do vaguely remember that. Yeah.
Did you see the podcast with? Well, this is not going to be my main question, but did you see the podcast with Jimmy Dore and Kyle Kulinski?
I saw about 90 seconds of each.
Say that again?
I saw about a minute and a half of each of those.
I watched both of them. They were pretty fantastic. I would love to see you and Sam Cedar go on one day.
I'm glad to go on any time, by all means.
Yeah. Okay. Now moving on. Now these were the main questions. Now my main question. You know, conservative and comedian Steven Crowder, right?
I'm familiar with him. Yeah.
Yeah. So the reason why I brought him up was because 2 weeks ago he got suspended from Twitter for a week because of a video that he posted where an intern of his crashed at an LGBTQ event in Texas. And after he posted it, hours later, YouTube deleted the video, and Twitter decided to suspend his account for a week. And after that, like he eventually got his Twitter account back, and he was able to post the video, but he had to blur out some of the stuff.
Okay.
But like an intern of his, like when he crashed in, he literally dressed up as a computer. But I don't know what they were trying to do. I think it was just for comedy. But I mean, I could go into the whole story, but I don't want to like waste your time.
Okay.
But my question to you is like, what are your thoughts on him getting suspended on Twitter for a week?
Listen, I don't know anything about this story, and of course I have no way of knowing if it's as you describe it or if there's key pieces of information missing. Here's my personal view is I am close to a free speech absolutist in that anything short of an incitement to violence or criminality, like speech which would include a video that is criminal in some way, I believe should just sort of be allowed to exist. At the same time, I have to recognize the right of companies like Google, which owns YouTube and Twitter, to establish and enforce terms of service, even if I disagree with them. And my sort of power as a consumer is to choose not to use those platforms if I feel like their terms of service don't agree with what I think they should be.
So here's the thing, David. The thing is, the video, this was not violent. It was just crashing in at an event, just for joke and comedy. Look, I don't I don't agree with Crowder on a lot of topics. I think he's overall an obnoxious human being.
Okay.
But overall, I don't think he should not be banned on Twitter. I've seen some of his videos, and I agree with him on guns and abortion. But overall, I don't think he should have been suspended from Twitter over that video.
Okay, but you do recognize Twitter's right to have the terms of service that they want to and to suspend users at their discretion, right? You respect that right of a private company.
No, I respect their right. I mean, they can do whatever they want, but
Right.
I'm just saying overall, like, I mean, I know I am defending Crowder, but
You are, okay.
I'm just trying to defend both sides and like pretend that like I support like my opposition's right to do whatever they want, even though I don't agree with them.
Okay.
And
All right, very good.
like
Well,
to
glad
do
you
the
made
same
that
also.
point. We know you're defending both sides, and I'm not familiar with the story, but at least I've been able to explain my view, generally speaking, on this issue. 617-830-4750. Let's try again with the 404 caller because we tried with them before and couldn't hear them. 404, are you there?
Hey, can you hear me?
We can. Who's this?
Hey, this is Jeff from Atlanta. How you doing?
Go ahead, Jeff.
Good, good. I saw your video on Cambridge Analytica, and it was really good, and I'm really appreciate it. But you asserted that Russians hacked the DNC, correct?
Well, what I asserted is that we've now learned that Guccifer was a particular GRU official who had been in touch with Roger Stone. I mean, it's not my assertion. In other words, I'm transparent in the sources
Well, no,
where I got.
you're agreeing with that particular narrative that it was a hack from either Guccifer or some Russians, correct?
It's not that I'm agreeing or disagreeing with the narrative. I've reported on where that information came from, and that's the assertion that's been made.
Okay, well, anyway, let me get to my main point. I found an article. Are you familiar with The Nation?
Yes, I am.
Okay, I found an article published on The Nation, and its title is a new report raises big questions about last year's DNC hack.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this article sources veteran intelligence professionals for insanity in their report, in which argued, based on their investigation, that the theft of the DNC emails was not a hack, but some sort of leak. And they provide some compelling evidence to back up this case. One piece of evidence was data transfer rate. And so the data transfer rate was something like 22.7 megabytes per second. But unfortunately, you cannot get those kinds of speeds over the internet. And apparently, Guccifer was hacking from Romania. The fastest speeds they could come up with was 11.8.
Okay, but hold on a second, Jeff. Hold on a second, Jeff. Guccifer 2.0 claimed to be Romanian. That was immediately in doubt because the Romanian that Guccifer was communicating in was terrible Romanian, so it didn't make any sense.
Well, yeah, but
hold on a second, Jeff.
Not
Please,
really
hold on,
the
Jeff.
issue.
Jeff, hold on a second. It's the issue if you're citing the impossibility of a Romanian internet connection being that fast. It is an issue if we've learned that the person in question isn't Romanian, right? That would be a really important
it's more
thing.
about the fact that it couldn't have been a hack because the speed was too fast.
Well, then why did you bring up Romania as a place where they wouldn't have internet that's that fast?
I was just sort of carrying on the conversation that establishes that it was an outside of the country hack, and that's not possible at the transfer rate. The transfer rate is too high. That it would literally someone literally had to stick a thumb drive into a USB port and download the information. Also,
I've not seen this article, but I have seen that particular assertion debunked.
I'll tweet it to you because it's pretty interesting. And this VIPS VIPS Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Insanity. This seems to be a pretty reliable sourse.
I couldn't tell you. Haven't heard of it.
Well, they were formed in 2003 to counteract Bush and his alleged weapons of mass destruction. They were saying, wait, we have no evidence for this. So I tend to believe that this could be a credible source.
Okay, what would change your mind? What would tell you that report is wrong and that Guccifer was a GRU intelligence officer?
Well, let's say they retracted this. if the Nation came out and retracted this article, and then someone else provided compelling evidence in a study as done by VIPS that says, "Oh, you were inaccurate." That's the scientific method is the way you go.
So let me ask you, Jeff. I'm curious. I'm curious, Jeff. Yeah. In the reporting that Guccifer was a specific Russian GRU operative, the scientific method, as you like to call it, has revealed that the reason they know that is because of an unmasked IP address connected specifically to a particular Russian intelligence facility in Moscow. Do you just not believe that? Because that's really specific evidence, isn't it?
Well, I mean, that is specific evidence, but that doesn't contradict the fact that that the actual leak was someone sticking the thumb drive into a computer, not some 400-pound guy on the internet.
Not a 400-pound guy. Okay. All right, Jeff. Well, listen, best of luck with that. Best of luck with that. I appreciate the call. I mean, Jeff always calls with something like this, and he's just, my sense is Jeff is a lost cause, you know? Okay, let's take a quick break. Please don't hang up if you're on hold. We will take more calls in a moment.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Let's go back to the phones at 617-830-4750. Next, we're going to go to our caller from the 808 area code. Caller, go ahead.
Hello?
That's you. Who's this?
This is Keanu.
All right, go ahead.
From Oregon. All right. Anyways, first of all, I want to say I really love your show, man. Pretty much watch it every day.
Thank you.
But my question is what do you think of Marxist theory, and how might it or might not apply to today's economy?
Like just very generally, Marxist theory?
Yeah.
Okay, general. So as the audience knows, I'm not a Marxist, I'm not a communist, I'm not a socialist. Mm-hmm. I think that the value theory of labor from Marx is very, very interesting, and it actually should be a fundamental element of economics as taught everywhere, because it explains to us in a really, really straightforward way how you take all these raw materials and you put them together and you end up with something that's worth more than the sum of its parts. Well, where is that value coming from? That is coming from the productivity of the labor that's putting it together. And then you can have a better understanding and be better prepared to discuss where and how should that surplus value be allocated in terms of, should it go to the capitalists or owners? Should it go to the workers? How should decisions about that allocation be made? So I think that, I took Marxian economics in college, and I think it's hugely, hugely valuable, and it'd be great if it was taught more all over the country, not to make people communists or socialists or Marxists, but to better their understanding of economics.
But specifically that. Okay. Cool. Awesome. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, thank you. I appreciate the call. Let's go to a next call. It's 617-830-4750. Let's try the 386 area code. Caller from 386. Go ahead.
Hi, David.
Hi, who's this?
My name is Giovanni. I live in Florida. I'm a big fan of your show. I found you through Kyle Kulinski's show, who I fronted through TYT, and I love your show and I love your videos.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
I'm a big fan. I have a degree in political science from the University of Central Florida, and I know you are a political science teacher up there in Boston.
No, I teach communication.
I just want to say,
I don't teach political science. I teach communication.
Oh, sorry, but we both love politics, and I've been very involved, especially since the disastrous election 2 years ago.
Absolutely.
I just want to say, what do you think about YouTube, censoring and, cutting out all independent media? I love you guys, like you and Kyle and Humanist Report and all others, because establishment media just keeps reporting the same stupid things, like they've been going with the whole Stormy Daniels affair. Yeah, and the whole thing, I think that's making Trump more popular. Look what happened with Bill Clinton 20 years ago. That's kind of making him more popular. And they haven't really covered issues that matter to people. Look, like his disastrous tax reform, or look at, all the cutting, all the defense spending, and now Trump is saying that he wants the military for pay for the wall.
Right.
So, you know.
So what's your question, Giovanni?
Stormy...
What's your question, Giovanni?
All right, my question is, what do you think about, you know, hold on, I just forgot the question. All right, how you feel about the establishment media just reporting on the whole affairs of Donald Trump instead of, I don't know, reporting on serious issues that are going to affect people?
Yeah, well, listen, I crushed CNN for this half-hour just, you know, show debate that they had with Stormy Daniels' lawyer and Michael Cohen's lawyer. I've been super clear, like the Stormy Daniels story is relevant insofar as the legality of the payments involved and the possible pattern of using non-disclosure agreements in a possibly coerced fashion to silence women. That's the relevant part. Trump having an affair is not really the relevant part. Hour-long discussions are a distraction. So big picture, I agree with you, with the caveat that there is validity to the story, but it's very, very specific. There's specific elements that are the important ones of that story.
Okay, thank you. I agree with you. Other question. How do you feel about John Bolton now being on Trump's cabinet? One thing I learned from Game of Thrones is don't trust anyone with the last name Bolton. I don't know if you watched that show. But,
I don't understand the reference. But yeah, I mean, I did a whole rant at the beginning of the week. I'm against, Bolton's a warmonger, and he's bringing him in, and it's just a disaster. Giovanni, thank you. Really appreciate the call. Great to hear from our viewers down in Florida. Let's go to the 573 area code. Caller from 573, tell us your name, and you can jump right into your question.
Yeah, am I on the line?
You're on the line.
Okay, yeah. Trying to think. Okay, because I was waiting forever for you to finally. Okay, anyway.
I apologize. I wasn't able to get to you quickly enough.
No, it's okay. It's
thank
fine.
you.
I was just wondering if you have been paying attention to. I haven't watched all the videos, so you maybe have commented on it, but I've just been wondering if you've been paying attention to the rise and popularity of that guy from Canada, Jordan Peterson.
Yeah.
And if because I have for the last 2 years, and I think one thing that really bothers me about him, and not just about him, because I do think he says a lot of pretty ridiculous things, but is how, like, I feel like a lot of leftist YouTubers or even personalities within the political realm are kind of silent on criticizing him because they feel that they're going to receive a lot of backlash.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if you maybe listen to a lot of the things he says, but, like, he does kind of make really ridiculous statements. Like, he had that one interview with Vice where he made some crazy comments about women and, you know, saying things like, oh, atheists have never been oppressed, or that, you know, in Western society, women have never been oppressed, and, you know, but then at the same time playing this narrative like, oh my God, men are so oppressed, and, like, it's just, I kind of feel like, because I feel, I don't know, I've been kind of listening to, like, I watch a lot of the more progressive media shows, but I feel like no one really has the balls to criticize him, because whenever someone does try to make an article about him or video about him, there's just so much backlash from
So here's the thing. I've thought about this a lot, and there's a lot of really good articles lately, including one by Nathan J. Robinson about Jordan Peterson.
Yeah,
I've interviewed on the program. Here's the bottom line with Jordan Peterson. Part of the reason he's become so popular, particularly with this group of men who sort of reject the concept of the SJW as this terrible thing, he's basically offering self-help type material. Self-help does really, really well. And a lot of the people that are gravitating towards Jordan Peterson, this male audience that you pointed out, you sort of described.
Yeah.
The reason they gravitate towards it is normal self-help stuff, like the more sort of new age stuff, all of that stuff. It feels a little bit too sissy, for lack of a better term. Like being associated with that stuff,
maybe.
They would feel like, you know, they would feel bad about themselves. Jordan Peterson is offering a very specific type of self-help type material that they can feel much better about getting involved in. And one of the things that Nathan Robinson points out that Jordan Peterson does really well is by being overly verbose and sort of mixing comments from all sorts of different areas, psychology and neuroscience and anthropology and all this different stuff. He's always operating outside of the sort of total expertise of any one academic institution. So, like, if you go to psychologists, they go, listen, this guy's talking about stuff that's not just psychology, so I'm not really an expert on that, because most academics are not going to get involved in commenting on things outside their area of expertise. So I think what Peterson has very effectively done, and while I think that the guy is basically a sophist, what I can totally unabashedly praise him for is that the PR optics and sort of business strategy he's put together is fantastic because of who he's able to pull in. He has come up with all sorts of writings and approaches, his list of 12 this and 9 that and all this different stuff that sounds really good to people who are desperate for some kind of direction and self-help type material that's not going to make them feel sort of like failure sissies. He makes them feel like, listen, you are oppressed to some degree, and that's where it gets to the oppression of men stuff. And here's a whole bunch of meaningless stuff that I've put together, the laws of life and all this different stuff for how you can live. And when you actually isolate some of the things he says, it is almost completely meaningless. And if you call him on it, he'll say one of two things. Either you're not understanding what I'm saying, you lack the capacity to understand it, or you're misquoting me in a malicious way. So, like, you can't win. You know what I mean? I think that the reason some people on the left aren't sort of calling him out is not so much that they're afraid of the backlash. It's that you can't win because in the end, he or his followers will say, you're deliberately misquoting him, and that's not even what he says.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's, I think I'd probably phrase, maybe, I mean, I'd agree with that. I notice a lot of people who, like, I don't know if you call them fake intellectuals, but they kind of have this tactic where they'll be so vague and kind of incoherent and maybe metaphorical in their speech that you can't really understand what they're saying.
That's right. This is the same thing.
Then
listen,
criticizing them is kind of impossible.
Deepak Chopra and Jordan Peterson are much more similar than either of them probably would like to admit, would be my guess. And a lot of their similar than a lot of their followers, but they do the same stuff. Like Sam Harris has called out, and I have many criticisms of Sam Harris, has called out Deepak Chopra when he says, you know, the universe is quantum, you know, just like this meaningless stuff that sounds, and it's bogus. You're not going to get anything out of it, you know?
Okay, thanks for answering my question.
All right, really appreciate it. Yeah, I've been reading a lot about Jordan Peterson's sophistry, and I'm glad that we got an opportunity to comment on it. Let's go to our caller from the 646 area code. Caller from 646, go right ahead.
Hi, David. How's it going?
Good, good. Who's this? And we're not on speakerphone, right?
I apologize. We were on speakerphone, but now we're not. Thank you. This is Randall from 646, and I think I called in before and I butchered my question, and I just wanted to get your take on sort of a general concern / issue.
Let's do it.
And I wanted to get your take. So I would say that the Trump, just to put it mildly, the Trump administration has broken so many presidential norms. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to find out, I guess, I would say the pendulum's going to swing the other way eventually, probably in 4 years, perhaps in 8 years, in that the Democrats are going to take over the presidency. And I just wanted to find out, I guess, what norms that have been broken should be embraced by the next president.
Oh, man, I don't know. I mean, so Trump has certainly not releasing tax returns. I think that that's one that we should get immediately back to. I think that the norm of just speaking in a completely disgusting way to media and people and minorities, and I think we should get back to the sort of respect of the office of the presidency. I'm trying to think. I mean, I think that the one thing I can say, and I don't agree with the way that Trump has done it, but I like the idea of separating the candidate from the party orthodoxy. So with Trump, it's just he doesn't really know anything, and he says whatever he thinks people want to hear, but it's led to him taking some positions that are not the orthodoxy of the Republican Party. I think that that's good. I just think the way Trump has done it has just kind of been totally haphazard and ambling around and feeling around in the dark, you know?
Sure. I wanted to push you a little bit about the strategy. Just, I guess, you know, as a progressive, I tend to be more rule following.
Right.
I respect the institutions. But would you ever support a progressive, I guess, administration or Congress that says we won't consider
oh boy
to be filled?
They won't. You won't consider. Or
Or
oh
avoiding
boy! All right, the call is completely off the rails, and I wish I knew what he was about to say that we should or shouldn't consider, because it sounded like it was going to be interesting, but that was not good.
Yeah, it's a good first question though.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, do you have a thought on that? Like, do you like any of the norm breaking that Trump has done?
The calling out of interest groups, like saying that you guys are bought and sold by the NRA.
Right.
We never used to see that from prior politicians. Now, Trump is just as corrupt as any past president, I guess you could say. But at least, ostensibly, he has the right words.
I like that. Yeah, I think I can agree with that. All right, sorry to everybody that we didn't get to. I know there's like a dozen people still holding and many who have hung up because they've been holding for so long. We will take calls again. We're just out of time for today. And, it looks like I even got disconnected. Our phone system going completely haywire. We'll take a break, regroup, and be back after this.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Let's do some audience questions. First one is from Annie. Hey, David, why is left-wing terrorism just not as prevalent as right-wing terrorism? This is a very, very hot button and touchy issue. And there are even people who will deny that the basis of the question is true, but it is true, right? Groups that study this stuff have made it clear that in the United States, domestic terrorism, overwhelmingly right-wing and not left-wing. Couple things that I want to say. Number one, you used to more commonly see eco-terrorism. We talked about eco-terrorism earlier this week on a bonus show, in fact. And eco-terrorism is one of the specific subsets of terror that is considered to be more left-wing because it's obviously for the good of the environment, which tends to be something that the left is more concerned with than the right. But that has diminished greatly over the last several decades. I think the answer is quite simply when you look at what motivates a left-winger and a right-winger to sort of take personal action systemically at a fundamental level, you understand why the right is more likely to go to terrorist activity, right? So on the left, when you see left-wing ideology, socialism, for example, or more social democracy, right? More social welfare programs, rights for all. The underlying idea is, even though it goes against what the status quo is, it wants to change the status quo. It's about going against sort of corporate power, authoritarian power, and it's about empowering the individual. It's about egalitarianism. It's about nonviolence, etc. So by its very nature, if you want health care for all because you believe that health is a right everyone is entitled to, you don't want to go and start killing people, right? And that's one of the real things that didn't make sense about the eco-terrorism trend, which is presumably you care about the environment because the environment relates to the health of the organisms on the earth. So you're kind of at odds with that if you go and you're willing to kill people in order to improve everybody's health by saving the environment. It doesn't really make sense, right? That exists with healthcare for all. That exists with ideas like universal basic income, reducing inequality. It's all meant to lift people up, particularly people from the bottom. So it's not an ideology that at its core lends itself to terrorism. When you look at the right and what motivates the right, especially the far right, you see people who want to, for example, impose their worldview on all others, whether it's the Christian extremists or the gun fetishists or whoever. So if you want to impose your view on others, that is a form of aggression or violence in and of itself. You're not allowing others to sort of live freely the way that they want. And you're more likely to take the view that if they're not going to come over to my side, I don't even know that I want them alive. I don't even know that they deserve to be alive. So there's a much more direct link between saying, here's what I am becoming an activist for, and I sort of hesitate to call these far-right extreme terrorist activists, but they probably see themselves as such. So it's much easier to understand why they would be moved to violence and terrorism against others in order to push their ideology. I think that that's the simplest way I can explain it. It's sort of at its core an issue of what it is they are activating for.
Yeah, and in thinking of right-wing terrorism, these right-wingers aren't just right-wing in the sense that they want lower taxes and less government. No. They're all the way out there. They want to destroy the government. They want to avenge some atrocities committed by the government.
That they believe, of course.
Like the Oklahoma City bombing. Timothy McVeigh went and killed 168 people there to avenge for the deaths at Waco.
Yeah.
Think of Dylan Roof at the Charleston Church. I mean, that was an anti-diversity thing.
That's right.
Wanted to kill black people specifically.
Right.
So it is very fringe.
It's also that there is a way, and again, you have to sort of think about the internal logic of some of these people. There's a way to think that the problem you're trying to solve can partially be solved by getting rid of people that are part of the problem. Whereas if you just want health care for all, there's no solution by going out and killing people. I guess you could say, well, if we killed the politicians against health care for all, but it's so antithetical to sort of the basic tenets of what you're trying to achieve, it just doesn't compute. So I think that for the most part, that is the idea that explains to us why we see so much more right-wing terror than left-wing terror. And with religion is a big part of it, right? So religious fundamentalism, which is at its core a right-wing ideology, also gets people to do violent things, and we see that across religions, right? We see extremist Christians, extremist Muslims, and extremists in sort of other religions as well take to violence in that way. Manny wrote in, hey, David, will the United States last forever? Most things don't last forever. If not, what will cause the downfall of the United States? This is an interesting question. The premise is a good one, which is that, listen, impermanence is part of life. Empires have risen and fallen. We can sort of say, it's sort of a truism in a way, that nothing lasts forever, except some things haven't yet ended. So it's possible at some point something will last close to forever. I mean, at some point the sun is going to expand and envelop the Earth, and unless we've moved to another planet, then whatever's here is going to end as well.
I think we have 4 or 5 billion more years, though.
We've got some time before that, yeah. I believe that, so we're in a different era, right? Just because the Roman Empire fell doesn't guarantee that the United States of America is going to fall through sort of a similar mechanism. But I feel very strongly that if we do see the fall of America, it's going to be because it rips itself apart from the inside rather than just Mexico takes over the United States or something like that. I think that the possibility of the United States splitting because of intractable political differences or whatever kind of other conflict we can imagine geopolitically or even internally. We know that there are major cultural differences in the United States, which thus far have not brought the United States close to splitting into parts since the Civil War, of course, which was probably the closest the United States has come to that. I believe it is more likely internal strife that would end the United States as we currently know it.
I guess the other possibilities would be the United States getting conquered by a foreign enemy. Now, obviously, we have the strongest military in the world, at least now, but maybe in centuries from now, some outside force could take us over. I guess that's conceivable.
Yeah.
And the other possibility would be that we approach like a new world order, have a one world government run by the UN or some other entity, and we don't need those nation-by-nation divides?
That would not so much be the fall. I mean, well, actually, the anti-UN, anti-globalist, anti-NWO types would see that as the fall of the United States, although it could, I guess, in the idea that Pat's putting forward, be some kind of collaborative effort to restructure. But I actually don't see that as
just like willingly likely. Giving up our sovereignty in some way or another.
Yeah, which would not be the downfall in the traditional way we would think of as the downfall. But yeah, and of course, what can we really predict with any certainty a couple hundred years from now, right? Like right now, we say, well, the U.S., we've got so many nuclear weapons, and we've got so much military power and economic power. How could we possibly imagine being in a situation where some other country could invade and take us over? 100 years is a long time. Even 50 years is a long time. Certainly 200 to 300 years is a long time. That would be, equivalent to the entire time that the United States has been in existence already. None of us can predict that. But presuming the sort of current status quo, I believe the most likely way the United States would destroy itself is destroying itself from within.
Forgetting about the rapture, too, which is imminent.
That could happen any time.
Day.
Yeah. It was supposed to happen in April of 2013. I think I did an interview with a woman who believed that was going to happen. And I guess that's also a possibility. Mickey wrote in, do you ever read the terms and conditions for things that you use? No, absolutely not. I don't know of any time that I've read the terms and conditions for anything that I've used, software, apps, whatever. I think that there are some terms and conditions which are sort of jokes because they know that nobody reads it. Now, where I do look more closely at what I'm signing would be like, for example, when I sign a car lease, I actually will look through the provisions. When I sign an office lease, in addition to having our lawyer look it over, I also look it over really closely. But I don't think that's really the gist of the question. I think the question is asking more about, like, even when you download an app onto your phone and there's 10 pages of terms and conditions and who knows what the hell you're agreeing to, I know that I'm an advocate of privacy and of responsible corporate behavior and all this stuff. I'm kind of part of the problem if I haphazardly just scroll through and accept whatever it is that an app manufacturer or software maker is giving me, right?
Yeah, how legally binding is some of that stuff too? Like if you upgrade your iTunes and it's 10 pages that no one's going to go through and it turns out there's some crazy provision in there that you agreed to, can they hold you accountable for that? I don't think so. I think you can get away with it.
Okay, I've talked to lawyers about, you know how when you go and you do something like go-karting or riding a horse or whatever.
Okay, yep.
There's usually signs that say you're here under your own risk, at your own risk.
You waive the liability.
You're waiving liability. This is risky behavior. You might sign off on something even.
That makes sense.
If you end up getting thrown off of a horse, you can still sue the horse riding place. If your go-kart explodes in a fiery disaster and you get burned badly, you can still sue. The place will say, well, listen, we had this waiver or whatever. And basically the idea is to show that they made an effort to inform you of the risks, but that doesn't exculpate them of liability if they were negligent. So I think that the idea would be, even if you ignore the terms and conditions, sign off on it, whatever, that doesn't give the company unlimited license to do absolutely whatever they want, particularly if it breaks some kind of law. They can say the person agreed to it, but they might still have done something that's against the law. So I think it's not 100% cut and dry, but the idea is they made an effort to tell you up front how they were going to handle your data or whatever else. And if you proceed at that point and opt not to read what it is that you're signing, that's sort of your fault and not theirs. But again, it's not just a blanket they can do whatever they want just because they put it in the terms and conditions.
Yeah, that makes sense. It'll help them in court.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard of like cash prizes being offered and they're hidden in the middle of terms and service agreements?
Oh, and it says like
will go weeks before someone claims it.
If you like in some provision, it might say, if you send an email to such and such, you're actually, and nobody reads it, and they know that nobody reads the stuff because nobody claims the prize for like months or years or even ever.
That's fun.
Yeah, this is not something I think a lot about. I have to admit, I don't know how much exposure I have to companies doing really horrible things because I just scroll to the bottom of the terms and conditions without ever reading it. I genuinely don't know. But I'm not proud of the fact that I don't do it, but it's one of those things that's deliberately set up so that people don't do it because it essentially makes your life impossible. If you're going to, if every app, program, and whatever that you use, you're going to read the entire thing, and arguably it's going to be written in a way that the layperson won't fully understand, why not get a lawyer to look at the terms and conditions before you update your iPhone software or whatever? It makes life impossible, practically speaking.
If you're going to do that, might as well just not use any technology.
You're hindering yourself, basically. You're in the same way, for sure. We've got a great bonus show for you today. Keep the questions coming. Sign up for the bonus show by becoming a member at davidpakman.com/membership or becoming a patron for at least $5 a month at patreon.com/davidpakmanshow.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.